Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Plant Free MD. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and today I have a very special guest, Petra Davelaar, who is coming here to tell us all about her work. And actually, we'll get into it. Petra, thank you so much for coming on. It's very nice to see you again.
Oh, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. Appreciate it.
Great. So, for people who don't know you and don't know your work, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I came sort of later in life to this particular way of living now that it is for me. 26 years ago, I became a parent, and from that moment on, I questioned everything. And of course, first all around pediatric health, but it became so much larger and it became my life. So I decided to go to school and learn. And in my mid 40s, I had to start from scratch. I had never gone to college. That's just not, I grew up in the Netherlands and well, we just didn't do that. So I started then and I went 8 years straight. I graduated in 2016 and started practicing. And then in 2018, my mom was diagnosed with colon cancer. And that was a shock for me. I had lost my dad when I was 23 from a glioblastoma. And so when that happened again, I thought, okay, no, I have to get to work. There's just so much to figure out. And we miss so much with the cancer story, clearly. And so I started studying even harder and in more directions. And yeah, here I am. Yeah.
Very good. So, I'm very sorry to hear about your both your parents.
Mm,
Um, So when your
thank you.
mom got her unfortunate diagnosis, that brought you to look at cancer in a different way. What did you find? Did you apply those did you apply those to your mom's treatment?
Yep. So I remembered back in 2014, that's the first time I came across deuterium. But I was in medical school and I just did not have the bandwidth to go and figure out what that's all about. But I went back to it at that moment in time. And I ferociously, went after every detail that I could find. And I applied that for her. As you may know, it's much harder to get your family members to do anything and listen to you than your clients. But we did it all, and fortunately, she was fine. She passed later on in life from a fall and mismanagement in the hospital. Nothing to do with her cancer, but yeah. But that is definitely what got me on this path. The whole Deuteronomic story started right there.
Okay. So
Yeah.
was that and what did you find out? What about deuterium is helpful in this?
Yeah, so deuterium, as you know, is the stable isotope of hydrogen. And we also refer to it as an oncoisotope, and it seems to have a specific role in cancer if we are overloaded on that for all the reasons that you may have heard. We eat too many foods that are too high in deuterium. We are not practicing any lifestyle modifications or ways of being in the world that prevent us from really achieving high levels of deuterium in our bodies and in our tissues. And so if we try and regulate those levels by all the ways that I've learned how to do, we can really make a shift. And so that's what I started doing. In 2018, I was fortunate at that time that we were able to have access to testing for both saliva and breath samples. And I did that for a lot of clients, and it was fascinating. And so I learned a lot from that. And depending on the type of cancer and the stage that clients were at, the very much the levels of deuterium in their tissues was higher for all of those. Unfortunately, right now I'm only can test saliva, which I do frequently. And yeah, it's really plays a role. And if you want to improve your mitochondrial function and your functioning in their body and uh, to try and lower those levels in all the ways that we know how is absolutely important.
And so what, for like a normal person that wouldn't
Yeah.
have any sort of underlying diseases or anything like that, what would you expect their deuterium levels to be?
So ideally, so let me explain first what the average level is of the ppm. We call that parts per million in water. Most drinking water in the US is around 150 parts per million, give or take, right? It depends on where you are. Some people are lucky, it's lower, others are higher. So that water level kind of determines how much we take in and how much water we drink. So in our bodies, ideally, in a healthy human, we would be around 135. That's it. Maybe 132. That would be fantastic. But that's not what I ever found. Rarely I found that. So most individuals with any issues that would present would be at least in the 140s. Those with cancer in the 150s and up. There was one stage 4 cancer client. She had 160 parts per million. It was stunning. So, and then I was at that time able to compare the level in saliva and breath, and that could give us some insight into how well someone is able to excrete the excess levels, because the saliva would always be slightly higher than your breath. And frequently those were very similar. So these people were just flooded. The system was flooded with it. So yeah, then go to work. And with cancer patients, I really think it's great to be able, anybody with the cancer diagnosis, to use deuterium depleted water for a period of time is very helpful to kind of drastically drop levels, while you implement all of the other pieces that can help you lower levels. So that's yeah what we work on.
And
Yeah.
so the deuterium depleted water, and if people
Yeah.
don't know, that's just water where they've reduced the amount of deuterium that's in there. It's an involved energy dependent process, but
Yeah.
so it's not cheap, but hopefully, things get cheaper as the market grows for it. Um, but apart from deuterium depleted water, what are the other techniques that someone could get their deuterium levels down?
Yeah, so food is the main one. You really consuming foods that are low in deuterium. Are fats are the lowest of all. That's kind of the stepwise. If you go, it's first fats, then your animal protein, best quality you can find, and then it's the green above ground vegetables, and then you start getting in higher levels from there on. So any fruits, any grains, any processed foods, then it just climbs up in higher levels. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, the amount of water that you consume. Most people are not aware that we produce our own metabolic water, which is absolutely key for many reasons. And we can get into that in a little bit. But yeah, so that's really where we start, and then adjusting their light environment. Um, I have come to understand that just working with deuterium depletions, if you will, I think it's all about regulation and moving towards um, uh, acknowledging the role that deuterium has in our body in many other ways. And so the food piece is important, but the light is most likely more important than anything else. So that's another really interesting aspect. One of the things that I do is research, and I speak to researchers, all the time. I schedule Zoom meetings. Unlike you do it all, and most podcasters, they do their interviews live. I do them behind the scenes, but we have email communication, we have Zoom meetings and discussions, and I try to learn from everyone as much as I can. Podcasts are amazing. As you know, a lot of great action is happening there. Um, and in the last few years, I've dealt with clients who've just presented at such a higher, advanced stage with cancer already. There are so many more pieces to the puzzle that we have to implement. And deuterium, managing those levels alone is not enough. So I have expanded to include as many quantum biology pieces of the puzzle that I'm aware of, that I know that we can change and that we have to change. So that's really been an amazing journey and wonderful to add all that to my daily recommendations for people to do.
And so you were saying that the light itself directly affects our deuterium status, or just in general, it's better for our health?
So the light, it's so much bigger, this whole story. And I have come to learn, and this is the work of Jack Kruse, as you know, he has educated me on the role of the POMC gene and melanin and the entire light environment that we are under and how it determines our existence. And so of all the learning that I've done, I've come to the conclusion. Now, please know, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a physicist. I am not. I'm an extremely motivated, naturopathic doctor who's trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together to try and get better results for people that last. So I've really come to realize that we are actually electrical beings that emit light, we emit magnetic fields, and we are regulated and fueled by sunlight, and we are maintained by gas. So that's a lot, I know, but it's really important, I think, to understand all of that, because once you acknowledge how we actually are put together and how we work, then you also realize that most of the treatments that we apply in medicine don't even, touch any of that. And so that then becomes a huge deal. And what we know, what I currently have come to realize, that most of what we do in medicine is wrong. And a lot of what we've been taught in school is wrong. And we are missing huge amounts of very fundamental biochemical, biophysical, quantum biology pieces of this puzzle that we must recognize and we have to implement. And so if the medical schools aren't doing it, we have to do it. And that's really, I think, what this whole, new way of sharing information is all about, bringing this to a whole other level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, we certainly haven't figured it out, obviously, because people are getting sicker, not better. I mean,
That's right.
we should be turning into like, future creatures and like, Star Trek with, transporters and food generators and things like that. If we were advancing, but we're not, we're getting worse and worse and worse.
We're
People are
getting
getting
worse and worse.
sicker.
Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously we haven't figured that one out yet.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So, but that's even the situation with cancer, right? We're really
Mm.
not so clear on what cancer exactly is. And, um, I heard a great podcast that Logan Duval did with Cameron Borg, and they were discussing the same issue. And really, it appears as though that there is a loss of cellular charge. So there has to be a net negative charge of a cell to maintain its viability, its health, its ability to communicate and transmit information and energy. And once you start losing that charge, that cell becomes, it's operating as though it's a single cellular organism, and so that changes everything, and we have to include all of that in our thinking. We also have to think about coherence within the cell and within the tissues. And that plays into light as well. So the light that our eyes receive and our skin receives and that our GI tract receives, that has to be the same light to create coherence in our body for all the processes to work in a very, very efficient way. And that's ultimately why it's so important to consume foods that are low, that are local and seasonal to where you are. So that's really another huge piece of it. And bringing that back to deuterium, if there's a lot of deuterium in a cell, you also interrupt that coherence in many ways. So that's another issue that's should be kept in consideration.
Hey everyone, really happy to announce a new sponsor for the show and for everybody down in Australia, Stockman Steaks, who are delivering high quality grass-fed and finished pasture-raised beef and other meats, flash frozen and vacuum sealed to your door, something that I've been enjoying a lot of myself recently as well. They also have a great range of specialty items such as high-fat keto mince and carnivore beef and organs mince with liver, kidneys, and beef heart as well. So use code Chaffee today for a free order of beef mince or another specialty gift along with your order at stockmansteaks.com.au, and I'll see you over there. Thanks, guys. It also, as we've come to understand, deuterium damages the mitochondria directly, and so
That's right.
Look at cancer as a metabolic mitochondrial disease.
Yeah.
Deuterium, the more damage to the mitochondria, the less they can function, the more likely they're going to go down that path, and the less likely they'll be able to recover from that. And then, very interestingly, Dr. Stephanie Seneff from MIT, who's been working recently with Dr. Laszlo Boros. She was previously she was at MIT as a computer science researcher, and then started down different tracks and was a glyphosate expert. And now she's gone down the deuterium track. But she said something very interesting, that she thinks that cancer cells at least act as a deuterium sink when someone's like very deuterium overloaded, like you said, these cancer patients at 150 or above parts per million, cancer cells take in a lot of deuterium and use it, and that helps cells divide. You need a certain amount of deuterium for cells to divide, and so they're rapidly dividing, so they're using a lot of deuterium, and she sort of noticed and observed that they sort of act as a deuterium sink and sucking deuterium out from the rest of the body and using it there. And so when, what if this was a protective mechanism, that body was doing this to isolate the deuterium in the cancer cells to get it away from the rest of the body in order to protect the rest of the body? It's an interesting way to think about it. I don't think anybody's ever thought about cancer as a protective mechanism, but you never know. We don't know what the hell's going on with the body in these cases. We just know that it's going wrong. And so it's an interesting way to think about it.
It is super interesting. Yeah. There's a whole other way that I've learned that deuterium plays a role. And if you let me explain this part, it's fascinating. The last year, I've been working with a group of scientists that includes Barry Ninham. He's an Australian scientist who spent years also in the US, but he's there, and he has published a series of papers, just recently the fourth one, that are, some would say, seminal papers that introduces to the world of nanobubbles. And this is utterly fascinating because it turns out that maybe for the last 300-400 years, I think it is, we have basically ignored, omitted the fact that dissolved gas plays a tremendous role in our body. And all the research, all the biochemistry, the colloids, surface chemistry, physical chemistry, they have all ignored it. None of them have included it in their considerations. And if you don't take dissolved gas in consideration, all the reactions change. Everything's different. So this is a whole other piece of why the way we currently practice medicine is just on very shaky ground and is missing fundamental parts. So it turns out that we breathe very differently than we do. I'll start there because that's really important to understand. So we've been told, we have in our atmosphere approximately 80% nitrogen and 20% of oxygen. And so we breathe in magically in our lungs, in our little alveoli, the red blood cells can just pick up the oxygen and off they go. Well, that's not what happens at all. It turns out that we actually breathe in the combination of both the nitrogen and the oxygen gas. And when that enters your alveoli, there is a 3D kind of honeycomb structure that then forms these teeny little nanobubbles. And those are made up of both nitrogen, oxygen gas. That then perfuses the vasculature. And in the capillaries is where the oxygen, not all of the oxygen, but some of the oxygen partitions into red blood cells. That's where the exchange happens. So this is fascinating. And it turns out that all of our vasculature and all of our cells, all of our tissues, everything has a layer that is called the endothelial surface layer glycocalyx complex. It's a mouthful, but basically, if you think of a cell, and we have given all sorts of wonderful properties to the cellular membrane that really, if you think about it, are impossible, that couldn't all be managed by that teeny little structure. So scale-wise, if you think of it, a cellular membrane is 3 nanometers, and then you have a layer of the glycocalyx, which is 50 nanometers. And this layer is super interesting. It's a interwoven kind of bicontinuous network of water tubules. And this actually directs all of the cellular traffic in and out of the cell. And it's also a neural network. And then from there is another layer that's 20 times that. And that is made up of these sulfated polymers. So you can think of that as like grass from, ocean grass. And that's highly sulfated. And that then is populated with the nanobubbles. And ultimately, the integrity and the structure of this layer determines the exclusion zone that happens above this nanobubble layer. And if this layer of the glycocalyx part, if that has a lot of deuterium in it, the actual structure of it changes, and the ability of water, of any kind of compound to move through it or traffic to happen changes. So that's fascinating, obviously. So these water tubules can change depending on the structure, the ion concentration, or, for instance, too much glucose or too little insulin. The curvature of the tubules changes, and then the connectivity and the conductivity changes. So then the entire mechanism kind of shifts. So, through metabolism, we produce constantly CO2 bubbles. So that's the other part of the bubbles that's present. And the CO2 is really important in eliminating infections of any sorts. So that's, it's just, yeah, the whole world opens up. I just created a page on my website that seeks to explain it and summarize it in a way. It's difficult because it's a 50-page paper, this last one that they put out, but it's really, really fundamental, and another reason why we need to do so much more research and understanding of how it all happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Does, yeah. Well, the thing
Yeah,
is that, I mean, there was as it's always explained to people, air goes in your lungs and then something happens and there's gas transfer, and it's just, using very broad general terms
that's
to
right.
describe this, but no one's saying exactly how that mechanism works. We have a lot of mechanisms for different sorts of things. We talk about the inflammatory cycle, and things going through and have this laminar flow, but then something happens and gets more congested, and then they actually have to become sticky and they're able to hit the wall. And we have all these little steps and mechanisms, and they explain those out, but then they just say, yeah, there's gas transfer, something happens and science happens, and then all of a sudden you have oxygen in your red blood cells. Obviously, there's more to that,
Yeah.
and understanding how that exactly works, and you can see these other parts of that, and that's very interesting. I hadn't heard that you have a higher deuterium level in those layers, and that's going to
Yeah.
interrupt gas transfer. But
Yeah, and if there's
obviously,
none, that's another piece. If there's none, the layer will collapse. So that's no
right.
good either, which is
Yeah,
why this whole piece about, I think, deuterium regulation is key, not just depletion, which is what
yeah,
you hear
eliminate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too much. You don't want to do that either. We need it. And it has
Mhm.
many other functions. And it's also believed to play a role in the bloodstream as a source for UV light. So this is a whole other piece. Once you start diving into that, how many of our proteins and hormones in our bodies need to be, the hormones need to be, uh, they have an absorption range in the UV light spectra, which is amazing. And back in 2019, I'm Dutch, so Roeland van Wijk has written some amazing books on light shaping life. And I actually went and visited him in his lab, and we had a conversation about it. And I tried to, it's always a great challenge for me to get scientists to kind of look outside of their box and add some other pieces to it. And I wanted to talk to him about deuterium, and he did not know about it, but it was fascinating anyway. His books are incredible, and that will tell you that our bodies produce, extreme low level UV light, and that actually activates many, many processes. And in fact, it controls mitosis. So, yeah, that's just a whole other piece, how deuterium plays
Yeah.
in our bodies.
So deuterium itself emits a bit of light, or some sort of process emits
There
light?
is a process. I don't know of the exact details. And the truth is, there is no researcher that has,
Sort of
described this
pinpointed
and
it.
published this. And I asked Roeland van Wijk about it. Sorry, I'm saying his name in Dutch, but it's Roeland van Wijk is what
Yeah.
people call it.
Really like it. Yeah.
Yeah. But he didn't know about it. He does not know where it comes from. But if you look at a deuterium lamp, I don't know if you ever heard of that, but that creates, you can look it up, but that gives off UV light. It's fascinating, and so it is under pressure. That's how it happens. So it is assumed that also takes place in our bloodstream, and is it's important for all the amino acid, the different amino acids to activate them. So yeah, there's a lot. There's so much.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing a video. I came across it recently as well, actually. But when a sperm meets an egg, and different sperms will not be able to get purchased, and then one does, there's a flash of light at the moment
Yeah.
of conception, which is really interesting. But it's an actual measurable flash of light, and you can see it on video, on powerful microscopy, and it sort of goes around from one side to the other, just like that, just
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And so obviously, I mean, so it is happening. We do know that, and listening to Jack Cruz and yourself, it doesn't surprise me that the body is emitting light in other ways, and I'm it's not going to do that for no reason. I'm sure there's this whole quantum side of our body that plays a part in.
That's right. We truly are electric. We are. Yeah. And
Yeah.
if those are interfered with all of the current, world that we live in, with
Mhm.
these magnetic frequencies and the blue light, and yeah, it's on and on. This affects all of our functioning. So this is a whole other way um, to think about it, and why we need to address these pieces so urgently and so importantly. I really talk about my clients. I try to explain that, the environment that you lived in which that allowed you to create this cancer, let's say, or whatever else is the issue, you must change that if you want lasting success in reversing what's happening. And that's likely the hardest part, for people to do these pieces. But I think it's really crucial. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we all work on. Yeah.
So how bad exactly is blue light? Like artificial blue light, obviously.
So I think it's truly detrimental for us, and it forces us to truly change. So this is that piece about palm seed, and Basically, there is something called a CLIP enzyme, and that gets generated, activated through blue light, and that causes us to increase our glucose and insulin levels. And we don't have to even eat high glucose foods for that to happen. So you can have insulin resistance just by blue light. And I think this is the data that we're also really seeing from India, where we have the greatest population that is skinny, that it has insulin resistance and diabetes. That's the largest, it's their greatest health challenge. And so, we have sensors everywhere in our skin, and there's so many pieces to it. I'm not even clear exactly on how best to summarize that for you, but it's just devastating. It's devastating for our eyes, for our skin. I have my yellow filters on here. I'm working only on an Ethernet cable so that I don't expose myself even further, even though there's enough coming from this anyway. I've tested it. But this is at least the least damaging that I can be. But ideally, we should all be sitting outside or have plexiglass in our windows so that we at least allow for the red light to come through, because regular glass does not allow for that. So, yeah, we have to really change the way our homes are built, how we do our days. And that's difficult because most of us are behind computers on a daily basis. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we understand the mechanism behind blue light causing insulin resistance and elevated glucose?
Yeah, this is through that POMC gene.
Mhm.
And so the POMC has to be activated by UV light, by UVA light specifically. And once that is activated, you produce the different forms of melanostimulating hormone, the alpha, the beta, the gamma, and that then gives rise to melanin. And melanin is ultimately the most important semiconductor in our body that can absorb all the light spectra and then use that to further charge separate water and increase our own metabolic water production, and then of course release electrons again, and those electrons will add to the net negative charge of the cell. So this is an amazing and Dr. Cruz can explain this in much greater detail, but it used to be like all other animals, they have their melanin either in their feathers or in their skin. But we have all internalized it, and it's inside of our brain, it's inside of our cochlea, it's inside of the ovaries. I think is a really high amount of melanin, but all of this is extremely important for functioning. But if we are not getting UVA light, then we don't have that activation, then we don't have the melanin, then everything starts breaking down. And that's ultimately the part of it.
Yeah.
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 So
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I really love the light stuff, and I think that it all comes back to just living in a biologically appropriate way for our species. We're going away from that. Obviously, I come at this from a nutrition standpoint because it's a
Yep.
huge issue. But light is a massive issue as well, because we're in no way in a natural light environment either. And um, I'm very fascinated by the work that's coming out in that field. I have a number of colleagues that they're just really blown away by this as well. And they've just sort of shifted their whole practice. Yes, they do ketogenic, carnivore, and just all that sort of stuff. But like probably the biggest thing is they're just like, you need to be outside. You need to get rid of these lights
Yeah.
and all that sort of stuff. That's one of the major things that they do. So it's very, very interesting to me.
I mean, I think we have to, because it's just not enough. It's not enough changing
Yeah.
the food. We know that. And, some would say light trumps food. It's not going to do it for you just by that. It's a huge step. And I know it will make a difference, but it won't solve all your problems by no means. That's really what we have to recognize, that we have to go there. Yeah.
I guess we could think about it as you're getting fed in different directions and different means. Food is one source of nutrition, but you're getting other sorts of inputs from the
Yeah.
light environment, and so you need that as a source of nutrition as well. And it's never a good idea to eat poison, and that's why we try not to eat poison and change our diet. But it's also not a good idea to get exposed. You could get light poisoning as well. And one of the healthier people that I've met is this lady Maggie, who she's 80 now, 84-year-old, turning 84-year-old rancher. She's been
Yeah.
carnivore her whole life. She's been crazy healthy, and she's still at 84, working 16-hour days,
Yeah.
sometimes 36 hours straight if she has to, during calving and all that sort of stuff. She's just up all the time, and doing 2-hour checks overnight, all that sort of stuff. And she's doing this all herself. It's not like she's just, there with a big white hat, just watching all her field hands, do their work. She's doing it. And that is probably a huge part of that. A, she's physically active and she's doing a lot of stuff with her body. So her body's staying strong and healthy. But also she's outside. She's
She's
outside every
outside.
single day.
That's
Every
exactly
single
right.
day, all
Yeah, I
day.
know. I listened to that podcast. It's fascinating. She's unbelievable. She's a powerhouse at that age doing what she's doing, as you know. That's very rare. But yeah, she's outside. That's the key. And she's also into cold, she's in cold as well. And that's another part of it. Cold is extremely useful. If you don't have the light, at least you have that part that will then do the whole cold thermogenesis piece that is so crucial for our mitochondria as well. These are the two ways for us to do it, light and cold. Yeah.
In the winter months, like, is it enough to people just to get outside and get the light in their eyes, or do you need it on your skin as well, or how does that work?
Well, there's not much UV light, and this all depends on, of course, where you are on what latitude. But yeah, I think if you get it in your eyes, most importantly, is absolutely key. Um, but if you can do the cold and as well and the sunshine, that would be even better. So,
Yeah.
submerging yourself in cold water is really a whole other level. Yeah.
And then you mentioned how actual, silicon glass will block out red light. What's the importance of the red light?
So infrared light, or the different spectra of red light, are there've been great podcasts on that as well. Max Gohane did some beautiful ones, and basically that we have in our mitochondria the different complexes, and on complex 4 it is fueled by infrared light. And so you upregulate even the production of your metabolic water at a higher rate doing so. And infrared light in that sense is beautiful and healing. And my clients really love it. In some cases, it helps you with your, different hormonals, with hair growth, for pain, all of it. It's a very useful light source to use. Yeah.
So even as an artificial, I mean, not getting it directly from the sun. Obviously, you're getting red light from the sun, out being out in the sun,
Yeah.
but I mean, like getting red light lamps, is that
Yeah.
beneficial? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's useful to use for treatment, but also in the evenings when we are still on computers, or we want to light our space, to definitely balance the spectra. And I will have some infrared light on as well
Hmm.
to complement that. Yeah, to be kind to our skin and not. It's difficult in most places. You can't even buy the incandescent light bulbs anymore, but that would be a preferred. There is an executive order, I think it was signed, that you can choose again to buy the light bulb of your choice, but
That's
um,
they made that illegal. Like, why,
they did.
it's
They
just
did.
insane.
It's
Yeah.
insane. But I think there are ways of getting them. And so that would be another approach, to at least make sure that you're not under LED or compact fluorescent light bulbs, which they just destroy your melatonin.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think infrared light is very useful, and I use it as a source in the evenings for lighting my environment.
I do wonder, like, why they would ever make incandescent bulbs illegal, and you have to get this blue light spectrum sort of LED, in the whole sort of, when you see enough of this stuff, you start becoming very cynical. You start seeing people doing something on purpose in
Hmm.
order to manipulate people in some certain way,
Yeah,
and they're doing it in one area, they're often doing it in other areas. And I know Dr. Cruz talks about what is it, MK Ultra project that the CIA did, looking at stimulating certain parts of the brain. You can make primates very docile, and he
yep,
knows about this because he was in the neurosurgery program at Tulane that
that's
was
right.
doing that, putting the probes in
Yeah.
there. And then they found that, like they, as in Jack and the researchers found that giving certain frequencies of blue light stimulated the same parts of the brain, made them very docile. And that happens to be the exact spectrum of blue light that comes in all our LEDs and on our computers and on our TVs and on our
Yeah.
phones.
Yeah.
And so that seems purposeful. And then when they're making it illegal to get the, like,
Exactly.
you're allowed to have, or you were allowed to have them, but you just weren't allowed to sell them, so they ran out. And and now you have to get these lights that are toxic in this way and make people docile and controllable in lab experiments. That just, I don't know, that just sounds some alarms in my head.
It should.
Yeah,
Yes, it should. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
Keeping
think
keeping us all sick and addicted and um in low dopamine state, on and on, all of it. Yeah,
sick, scared, ignorant people are very easy to control.
that's
Very,
right.
especially when you're going to be the one to provide the healthcare, when you're going to be the one to protect them, when you're going to provide the safety and security and food and money and housing, and you're just there and worried and upset and unwell. That looks like a very good option. And of course, that's just, as Friedrich Hayek said, the road to serfdom, aka slavery, because the serfs
Hmm.
were definitely
Hmm.
slaves.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, very scary stuff. Um, so for practical purpose, oh, actually, one quick question, because I was speaking with Gabor Somlai, who did a lot of the early, and is doing a lot of the research on deuterium, and sort of started this ball rolling. He was saying that in his cancer research studies, that some of his patients, a lot of them were responding really, really well with deuterium depleted water. And then he had like one guy that just wasn't responding at all. The cancer wasn't going away. And it turns out that he was taking like high doses of vitamin C and antioxidants. And it turns out there actually, that was detrimental because the cancer cells died of oxidative stress. And so and so the deuterium forced a lot of free radicals, a lot of oxidative stress, and eventually they just died.
Yeah.
And by putting in vitamin C, you're actually protecting the cancer cells. When you're considering this sort of therapies or ketogenic metabolic therapy, deuterium depletion, et cetera, for someone with cancer, is that something you take into consideration as well?
Yeah, so I'm so glad you brought that up. I think it's an important issue, and I think we have to actually start talking differently about antioxidants because
Mhm.
that term just gets used for almost all sorts of substances, and I think there's a great variety in what we use. And again, Cameron Bork made a great Substack about this, that we should really be calling them redox modulators rather than antioxidants. And I think there's a great variety in what substances people can use. And I agree with Gabor that we should not be using high dose vitamin C or synthetic glutathione for that matter at all. I think regardless, I don't think those are great, period, on deuterium depleted water or not. But to say that we can't use any agents that have some aspect of antioxidant properties is also not correct. And I think it confuses people. And that's my issue with that statement. If you look at my website, I actually listed all of the different mechanisms by which deuterium depleted water can help you improve and reverse disease process. And so only one of those actually has to do with causing this oxidative stress piece. There's many other mechanisms. So I want to really be clear that yes, synthetic supplements are not a good idea, really probably almost never. So, but at the same time, so there is a therapy currently being used, and it's in its phase 3 trials, I should say, by a company called Courses in Switzerland. And it's a very high dose of isoquercetin, which is an even more potent version of a quercetin. And it has many beautiful properties. And it's paired with a teeny amount of B3 and vitamin C. And then at the same time, they use saffrolucost, which is basically a drug that's off patent, and they're using it for all of its anti-cancer properties. At the same time, it is a really potent phosphodiisomerase inhibitor, and that's a protein that's very present in tumors. So that is a part of it. Another piece is that it's a VEGF inhibitor. So that's really great. So they match that with the isoquercetin, and they've done that synergistically with people undergoing chemotherapy, and the results are quite astonishing. Like, they're getting really, really great benefit from that. And so that's to the point. It's like, it's really specific to what you consider to be an antioxidant and what all the other properties of that compound are. And so that needs to be, it's more nuanced than that, but honestly, I'm totally in agreement with synthetic supplements. I don't use them. I don't advocate them. I'm not a supporter of vitamin D supplementation either. I want you in the sun. And, I think I've collected over 500 papers now that on vitamin D. And the reality is it's so much more complex than people say. Just drive your level up to 100 if you have cancer. It's wrong. It's just wrong. And I can make a huge case why, but it's just, we need to be in the sunlight. Tumor cells have VDR receptors too, and it's inappropriate to drive that to levels that we don't even understand that there are 20 or more forms of vitamin D, and the one that we're tracking and the one that we're giving is involved in calcium metabolism, not so much anti-cancer. And those studies have already been published too, that they say, oh yes, these people with cancer were low in vitamin D. We gave them vitamin D, didn't work, no clinical benefit. So, anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but yeah. So we have to be considerate in all of the agents that we use in somebody that's not well. And I agree, they can compete in pathways. That's for sure. That would be bad.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a difference between the vitamin D that you make from the sun and get from food, and that we supplement as well,
That's
and
right.
they behave very differently chemically in our body. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm the same way. If I have a patient that has low vitamin D, I'm fixing their diet. I'm telling them to get out in the sun,
Yeah.
and that's interesting too. Not for people that don't necessarily know, I was actually told this when I was a kid. My dad told me this. So this was something that he knew. But I found this later in papers that you make vitamin D as sort of a sun UV blocker protected, just a bit of a sun protection. And some studies have been shown that it can take up to 48 hours for it to reabsorb fully in your skin. And you make some, under the epithelial layer, but a lot of it will be get on more superficially and get in the sebum in our skin. And so if you take a
Mhm.
shower after you go in the sun, you just wash it all off, and you
Mhm.
won't absorb it. It's, oh, you only need to be in the sun for 15 minutes to get all the vitamin D that you need. Well, why is your vitamin D low then? You
Yeah,
know,
that's right.
it's not working. And because people are just showering directly afterwards. And so I would always tell them, well, the recommendation when I was a kid was at least wait 6 to 8 hours before you
Mhm.
shower.
Mhm.
And so that's what I tell my patients. Or I've seen people even just changing. Okay, go in the sun today. Okay, if you want to rinse off, get your armpits and things like that, but then just like leave the bulk of your skin alone
Mhm.
and don't
Mhm.
wash that with soap.
That's right.
And I've seen people's vitamin D go way up just by
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I was going to ask you as well, since we were talking about cancer, and and obviously that's a very, very big hot button item. This is getting more and more publications coming out with alternate therapies, either as an adjunct or some people are choosing to do this instead. Things like GBM, that of. It's we haven't had many advancements in treatment in the last century, and so the people that are living longer at least anecdotally, are going outside of that and saying, okay, I'll get the surgery, but the chemo and radiation don't seem to be doing much.
Yeah.
And they're going down the ketogenic metabolic therapy route, the deuterium route, those sorts of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
That's something you treat, is that correct?
I mean, treat. I advise
Or
people
advise
in
people?
certain, approaches to include when they are faced with that. Yeah, but as you know, that's just a devastating form of cancer and
Yeah.
very, very difficult. There's an incredible case of a priest in Hungary who has maintained, his cancer-free status after, I think he's over 7 years now, of consuming just a totally carnivore, high-fat, organ-based meal. That's it. That's all he does.
Yeah, very
Um,
good.
yeah.
And then, and we didn't touch on this, but that, sort of when you're helping somebody put together a plan, would it be ketogenic sort of dietary approach, deuterium, and then and what else? What sort of recommendations would you have for people when they're facing something like cancer?
Yeah, so really, I try to help them navigate the entire terrain of treatment options and so forth. And we discuss, of course, food. I want them that, to me, the most important aspect is for them to be able to be metabolically flexible, that they can use fat for fuel. Most people can't. They have never been in ketosis. It takes weeks and weeks to get there. There's lots of frustration. So some fasting maybe we will do, and then it goes. So yeah, food is important. Low deuterium types of foods to me is the key, and that is also just high fat and ketogenic, carnivore diet. Um, and then I like to pair that with, of course, all of the sun parts and mitigating your Wi-Fi situation. I like to do some specific labs and make sure that there aren't any deficiencies that we should address or cover. Um, Basically, that is the extent of, I do research for them on the specific treatments that they've been recommended as well, and then we make sure that that would be right, or in some cases we are able to write a case for the oncologist and come up with a less toxic approach and first try that, and that has worked beautifully. But if you come with data and if you come informed reason, then that can work. So these are all part of the approach that I help them by, and in some cases you really just do need these targeted tumor terminating therapies, because I've also seen clients who insist on not doing anything and trying to coexist with tumors for years on end, and it takes its toll on the body to do that. And I think a blend of reasonable interventions makes sense.
Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys. What about the idea about interrupting glutamine and using the other sort of agents that can disrupt glutamine?
Yeah, so I'm not at all convinced that that's a strategy. In fact, I wrote an article on that for the Townsend newsletter. I don't think glutamine is an important substrate for tumors at all, and in fact, cancer patients do need some glutamine at the end. I have had a client who had bilateral breast cancer, and she tried that strategy. And I know it's anecdotal and it's only one case, but she did all the exact recommendations, and she was on the medications. as suggested by Thomas Seyfried, and it didn't work. Our tumors doubled. So, we know, because of course there's way many more things going on. And if we don't have very specific data on how to what your amino acid status is, first of all, what it is like, very detailed information, then maybe you can start addressing it. There are therapies like this being done in Europe right now as well. And I just don't know how that would be helpful. It's very difficult for me to wrap my head around. I think there are other therapies to consider, and one that I really think has a lot of promise, and I have several of my clients currently on them or in the process of starting them, and that is personalized pooled peptides. And those are very different than anything else that I've come across, really. It's a treatment where they do very deep analysis on your blood and urine, and it is really looking at protein expression, and to see how they can come up with a personal basically script for you to inject for a year, a couple times a week, to override and correct or maybe re-instruct certain expression of genes that are happening with these proteins. And they had a really great success rate of over 70% of late stage cancer of 3 years of no evidence of disease, which, as you know, for that late stage is really difficult to accomplish. And so I think there's a lot that makes a lot of sense to me. And certainly if you've done other therapies where you find yourself in a place where you are currently not observing any cancer on scans, I think that makes a lot of sense, in addition to, changing your entire environment and making sure that you do everything to, maintain great charge of your cells and are able to, keep going forward.
Yeah. I want to preface for people listening also that neither of us are advocating to like not go to the oncologist and talking about care, because I think it's a very, very important role that we have in allopathic medicine for cancer care, and some of them are extremely effective. There's some cancer treatments that, for certain things, for chemo, radiation, whatever, they could have a 90+% 5-year survival rate and remission rate and things like that for certain things, and other ones are not so good, such as GBM, which is a much lower 5-year survival. But it's something certainly to take holistically and think about other sorts of things that can add on to your treatment, and think about things that don't just think, okay, well, this is the only option, because there can be other options. And so to be just so people know that you still go to your oncologist.
Oh, I totally support that. Yes, absolutely. And that's what I try to do, and work with them as a team. And, you want to get out of the system that you've paid into for so long. That's another aspect of it. But yeah, you're right. Some of these treatments do work, and they work. It's been shown. And radiation for a short course can be extremely effective. So that, you can keep going. And that's what it's ultimately all about, trying to overcome it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So then, there are some people that are now coming to things like ivermectin, fenbendazole, mebendazole. Is there a role for that in certain cancer lines?
So I think those are treatments that I cannot prescribe, but most of my clients are self-directing them and using them regardless. And they don't often tell their oncologists that, because they're afraid that they may not receive care any longer. But this is a real issue. And um, if the data continues, the testimonials that we're hearing are so strong and so helpful, and particularly in a synergistic fashion, I think we must acknowledge that there's a role for that, and hopefully we will. Yeah.
Do you have a sort of proposed mechanism of action that these generally antiparasitics would work. I mean,
Yes.
some people are saying that it's actually cancers are actually parasitical infections, and that's why these things work. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they actually work by many different mechanisms, and they work. I don't think cancer is a parasitic infection. I think
Neither do I.
so, but I think nor is it a fungal infection. I think the beauty. So, and I've been trying to look at, and if only I had more time, I would know even more about it. But the fenden, I for sure for fenbendazole, it inhibits the formation of microtubules, right? That's one huge piece, and that's kind of like the cellular skeleton. So that can happen. And it's also an antifungal, very potent. So, okay, we can see if you look at the data, in many different tumors, you will find, I don't know, for every 10,000 tumor cells, there will be one, fungal cell. So, okay, so that's helpful. And for ivermectin, I have now come to 24 different mechanisms that this works. I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
yeah, and all the different pathways. So there is so many, whether it's the mTOR or the MAPK, or it's mind-boggling. So yeah, and I'm at 24 and I'm not done. So yeah, I'm I'm
Yeah.
outlining it all. So yeah, clearly there's a role for them.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's the thing that commonality there, people saying that, well, this works on cancers, this also works on parasites, therefore parasites cause cancer, which, well, we do look at cancer cells under very strong microscopes. I've never once seen a parasite, never heard of it being there, or even inside the cells, intracellular parasites or anything like that. I've never seen one. I've never heard of one. Doesn't mean that they're not there. Just maybe, but we do look at cancer cells under electron microscopes. We can actually see the individual mitochondria, and no one's really reporting
Mhm.
parasites yet. So there's that strike
Yeah.
against it. Maybe we'll find some, but so far nothing's come up. But there are similar mechanisms, right? If you block microtubule production, that's going to stuff up
Mhm.
um, a fungal cell development. I
Yeah,
mean, it just is. And so you can have this common pathway that disrupt both parasites and fungus and cancers. And that's the important thing, is it sort of hits those, but it doesn't bugger up the rest of your body. And that's the
that's right.
important
That's
distinction
right.
there. And that's what
Yeah,
makes it safe, or safer than a lot of other things.
that's right. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
ultimately, we want something that's effective. So if it
Yeah.
is, it turns out to be really as good as so many people are reporting, then okay, yeah,
Yeah.
there is a role for it. That's clear. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to reopen just the curiosity about these different sorts of things. There are multi-million dollar drug trials going on for these things because there's not multi-million dollars behind fenbendazole and ivermectin because they're cheap, they're off patent.
Yeah.
And if one company spends millions of dollars that makes ivermectin, spends millions of dollars to say, look how great ivermectin is, well, that may benefit them slightly, but there's anybody else can make ivermectin too. And so how much of the market share do they have?
That's
And
correct.
so, it's not always worth it to them in a cost benefit analysis. And so they just don't do it. So they look at other things that, like, recently they were looking at you know, some other infection that ivermectin treated and was actually shown to be a known cure, even though people made that illegal to treat that. But it was actually released in the government document. I think it was the DARPA documents that even said this is a known cure. And yet they criminalized its use, which is, again, the cynic in me says, what the hell is that about? I mean, that just
Yeah.
is pretty wild.
Yeah.
But instead of using that, and now there's a treatment for that. And it's very expensive. It's hundreds of dollars a dose, and it's basically the same mechanism of action as ivermectin. It's just now it's new, so you can patent it,
Yeah.
and so that's where that is. But I think it's really important to get private citizen scientists and private labs to look at this and look at the reallocation of these drugs and repurpose them and
Yeah.
these other things, because they are cheap, and if they work, and they work better than other things. I mean, there's this, what is it, 2018, they found, I think it was, ivermectin was like a better treatment than like the standard of care for breast cancer or something like that. It was like in Mexico somewhere they did that study. And so it was just like, okay, we need to look at this, and we have billions of dollars in government funding going to research, but it's being directed into pharmaceuticals and the wrong sort of stuff. That's something that can make money on the back end because people are at universities, et cetera. They'll get these government grants, which are public money. They'll get this grant money to then do some research so that they can go and patent it. And that patent money doesn't go back to the American citizens
Nope.
who paid for it. It
Nope.
goes to them, it goes to the university, it goes to the institution that came up with it. So that's got to go,
You
you
nailed
know.
it. Yeah,
And if that goes, and they're not looking for this product to make at the end of it, and this money needs to go towards just good science, really.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
hopefully we
Well,
can get
we
more
can hopefully some of that will
attention.
change in the next few years. I remain hopeful of that. So let's see.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Um, well, Petra, thank you so much for that. That was really interesting. I mean, there's so many things that we could have just spent hours on each little
I
thing.
know.
It was great to get that overview. Where can people find you? What's your social media and website and et cetera, so people can find you and see more of your work?
Yeah, I'm not really into social media, but my website
Good,
is
good for
Dr.
you.
Petra.
Yeah,
I just can't.
yeah.
It's a time suck.
Oh
Dr.
yeah.
Petra D, just for the T for my last name,
Mhm.
.com. And I'm also closely working with Logan Duvall and a team of really great support. Willem Bresser, Sophia Dorfsman, and Joe Campo. We're creating a educational platform for sowing prosperity to really help spread awareness for everyone who is facing a cancer diagnosis and even just to prevent a cancer diagnosis, all of it. And so that's great. So soon at sowingprosperity.com, there will be lots more information coming.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Well, I will put those down in the description, and people can go find that there.
right.
And yeah, I encourage everyone to go check it out. And like you said, you have tons of resources there that we discussed here, and go into a lot more detail there. So that's great. Um, Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It was great to see you and talk to you in sort of face to face.
Yeah, you're so welcome. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope you enjoyed that. Please do go to Dr. Davelaar's website and see more of her work and support her there and the work that they're doing. And if you like this, please do comment, like, and share. And yeah, and subscribe if you haven't. Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Hey guys, thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to what I had to say. If you like it, then please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast. And if you're on YouTube, then please hit that little bell and subscribe, and that'll let you know anytime I have a new video out, which should be every week, if not more. And if you could share this with your friends, that would help me get the word out and let me know that you like what I'm doing. Thanks again, guys.